on WebEx joining us, Senator Fausto and Senator Tyson. So with that then, don't want to delay us. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first group of regulations, which is the Emergency Medical Services Board. And with that then, we will invite Joseph House, the Executive Director. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. My name is Joe House. I'm the Executive Director of the Emergency Medical Services Board, which is your regulatory body that deals with all things ambulance-related and EMS providers, so EMTs, paramedics, and such. 3 regulations for you this morning. All 3 of them pertain to the topic of staffing and utilization of the compact that we belong in with that on the interstate compact side of things. So Kansas is one of 25 states currently in the EMS compact. We've got 3 more slated to hopefully be added in by the end of this year. All of our contiguous states or surrounding Kansas are a part of the compact as well. So that first regulation is 10926. What we ultimately did within 10926 was take out the components of staffing to place them into a second regulation that we're going to end up talking about here very, very shortly. So, and then what 10926 does is it just goes through and updates things after that removal. So
Why don't you go ahead and we'll save any questions for the end.
Awesome. So moving on to 10927A, again, it's a new regulation. We had 10927, which dealt with ground ambulance staffing in the past, which eliminated when they moved it into 26. We decided that was a horrible place to have it, to try to bring it back and make it read a little bit easier. So 27A, along with the changes requested by the legislature, well, not requested, required by the legislature after the last session in 2025. This reflects staffing practices based upon that change in statute. And then finally, in 109-11, that deals with the air ambulance standards for both staffing and equipment. In this, again, the primary focus was taking the compact staffing side of things and ensuring that that could be done and included and allow them to leverage that. But then also it cleaned up quite a bit to make that hopefully read a little bit better. With that, that's all 3 of them.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and open it for any questions. I do have one, just air ambulance. Does that mean by helicopter or?
Both, great question, and it is by both helicopter and by fixed wing.
Okay.
So
just what it sounds like. So, okay, great. Any questions? Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director House, there has been some controversy over the past several months about how many people should be on board a ground ambulance and what, if any, certifications they might require. I'm not clear from what you're doing in 10927A, I guess it is, or anywhere else. Is there a change from the status quo in the number of people required on board a ground ambulance or their qualifications?
Great question, Representative. And 10927A matches what statute changed last year. So it does, prior to that statutory change, we required a minimum of 2 providers on every ambulance, one of which could be an emergency medical responder. What the legislature came back in 2025 and said they wanted to see a CPR certified driver to be able to be included. So we have allowed that to occur. It's within about 6 agencies have requested that, followed the statutory requirements for that, and 10927A mirrors the statutory requirements.
So the reference to EMR, which is in here somewhere because I looked at it and wasn't sure what it meant, sorry. The reference to EMR, what are the qualifications to be an EMR in Kansas?
Great question. And EMR is an emergency medical responder. It is the entry-level unit for an EMS provider in the state. It's roughly about 55 hours worth of education and then a standardized exam skills test and such.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Senator Francisco and then Senator Fausto. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at 109-2-11, and one of the changes that's made under, I guess, number 3 is to add currently dated to medical supplies. I'm thinking there was some discussion that may not be required for every type of medical supplies. And do you have any comments about that?
So the addition of currently dated, if they have an expiration date, that's where we go with currently dated. And so we do believe that if it does have an expiration date posted and it hasn't been legally extended, that we adhere to that currently dated side of things.
Thank you. And I do have one follow-up question. That same regulation on page 4, all those new requirements, they simply weren't required before? I mean, they're in there as new, but
Correct. And that too is also an excellent question. So what we had in there prior to, you saw the bloodborne, it actually comes from, I believe, part of the beginning. So we list out what bloodborne and body fluid pathogen protection equipment within the ground ambulance standard. And so that language, whereas it was there globally, this allows, provides a little more detail and matches it with our ground ambulance standard.
okay, thank you. Senator Faustigedo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe, I almost didn't recognize you with the mustache. And Representative Carmichael asked one of my questions, but going back to your first point that you made, could you elaborate a little bit more on staffing? You talked about some changes within policy within the 2026 legislative session. What do you mean exactly staffing changes? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And is that the 2025 legislature came through and codified a variance process that we had that allowed for a person that's trained in numerous things, but fell just short of that emergency medical responder to provide, to be that second EMS provider on the ambulance and meet staffing requirements. So the 2025 legislature placed a population limit upon that practice, which was counties of less than, I'm sorry, there's been a little confusion on that. I just want to make sure that I had that, of a population of 30,000 or less. And so with that population change, it said the local operator needed to go ahead and adopt a policy that stated that this was the practice that they were going to follow in moving forward. And so the board had allowed it through the variance process up until that point for all, still allows for the variance process for services that are in a county that's larger than 30,000 or 30,001, but they typically have more resources, so they don't necessarily see the need of having that variance as often as what our folks under that population threshold had.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So are the regulations you're proposing today, were these all a result of the 2025 legislative session?
They were.
And was there a time frame for the regulations and rules to be promulgated in that statute?
No, there was not.
Okay, but it was a year ago. So appreciate the work of the board, and thank you for bringing these forward. If there aren't any other questions, then again, thank you for coming and appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from the Secretary of State's office. We will hear from Clay Barker, General Counsel. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clay Barker, General Counsel, Kansas Secretary of State. The regulation you have, proposed regulation you have before you is essentially a checklist for procedural inspections of county election offices. And I'll give you the timeline of how it came about first. In 2022, the legislature, at the Secretary's suggestion, enacted a law requiring procedural audits of counties. And it would be done in 4 counties 1 large, 1 medium, and 2 small. Those were defined by population in odd years, so 2023, 2025. And we immediately drafted a proposed regulation, and we used it on 4 counties in 2023, McPherson, Rooks, Wabunsee, and Shawnee. We took feedback from that, revised it, and in 2025, we did it again in Brown, Sheridan, Cowley, and Wyandotte, revised it somewhat after that, and then put it into the regulations process in September 2025. And that may seem like 3 years is a long time from the statutory enactment until the regulation, but we believe because there was only 105 counties that are interested in this and they were all aware of what was going on, and this only occurs in odd years, we wanted to make sure we got it right before we put it in for adoption. And we also took some suggestions from the Attorney General and Department of Administration. And the way the inspection is broken down, it's 2 parts. The first part is the county sends our office designated records, which we examine. And the second part, we go on site and examine the physical location and some other records. And the input we took for the list was, first, we took feedback from all the counties, what they thought should be in there. Second, we looked at new legislation that put an emphasis on things where the legislation was enacting a procedure counties may not have been familiar with in the past to make sure it's being done. We took suggestions from legislative post-audit. They had found some things when they did their 2 election audits, and we made sure those were incorporated. Records that are commonly requested in open records requests, CORA requests, to make sure counties had them. And anything that was either a focus in lawsuits or something that would help protect the state to make sure it was recorded properly by the counties, so those were on hand. And those were some of the items we took into account. And just briefly, I won't read down the whole checklist, but some of the things we look at is equipment records, when it was acquired, when software was updated, records of that sort, chain of custody of ballots or equipment on election day to make sure they're properly filled out and signed so everything moves around and is recorded, training records for poll workers and for county election officers so we can validate when somebody was trained on certain aspects, Disability Act provisions to make sure there's always disabled, accessible equipment at polling places, physical security of the county election equipment. 2 years ago, the Secretary of State substantially upgraded the physical and cybersecurity requirements and then gave almost all the counties that asked for it, HAVA security grants so they could pay for it. Voter registration procedures, including voter roll maintenance to make sure that's being done properly. Provisions about advanced mail ballot requests, signature verification in that process, and then the storage of cast ballots. And you might recall that the legislative post-audit had found 1 county that had put too many records in the ballot boxes. Once ballots are cast, they're secured after the election time period, and they can't be opened for 22 months without a court order and then destroyed. And this county, probably mistakenly, had put too many records in those sealed boxes. And this is to make sure that doesn't happen again, that counties have proper procedures for what they store. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Barker. Nice to see you. Once the audit is completed, is there a report generated? Is it public? If so, where do I find it?
Representative, that would be an open record unless there's some physical security exemptions. There's no formal report published, but we have the records of what came out of all 4 county inspections.
So the reason I ask is presumably audits are designed to detect problems and correct problems and make improvements. And so if I, as a legislator, want to be able to peruse through these audits to see if any bright ideas come to mind, I send you a open records request for what?
Representative, you could just request the results of the procedural audits that have been done either 23, 25, or in the future, and we'd have that.
And just so I will understand, what type of documents should I expect to receive? Is it going to be 150 pages of checklists and boxes, or is it 3 pages of, it looked okay, or no, there was this problem? Just so I have an idea of what I'm looking for.
Representative, I actually haven't seen the record of the audit, what the inspectors recorded, but it would be a small report going through the checklist and what they found, whether it was satisfactory, not satisfactory, and why. And we do use that for training counties to discuss what was found. But if you request it, we could give you either a summary or all the inspection reports.
I'll try to get something to you yet today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are these entirely new procedures? I mean, the whole regulation is
Senator, the
new.
regulation is completely new. It's not an amendment. It's a brand new regulation.
I see that. Is it similar to what other states do for their procedural audit process?
Senator, when Kansas adopted the law, we were only the second state to do this. And I can't remember if it was Texas or Mississippi had already done it. I don't know how many other states have added a procedural audit in, but we were the second state to do it. And we did ask other states also for ideas on their audits, but each state does it in a different way. They focus on different aspects of their procedure.
Thank you. Senator Fausto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clay, who are the inspectors that are performing this search and audits? Is it you going to do it, or is it county commissioners? Who's doing this? Thank you.
Senator, it's done by the election staff and the Secretary of State. So Mr. Caskey, and he currently only has 3 staff members, but they would review the materials in our office, and they would rent a car or get in a van and drive out to the county's location and do an all-day inspection there on site.
Madam Chair, Clay, did you say you were doing all 105 counties, or is this just random? Thank you.
Senator, it's random, and it's 4 counties every odd year. And the legislature set up population categories, but one is a large county like Sedgwick, Shawnee, Wyandotte, or Johnson. One is a medium-sized county, and then 2 are the smaller, usually rural counties.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barker, this is extremely helpful. I guess I did want to maybe follow up with the Wichita rep's question. Is there any sort of grading? I mean, as far as, well, 2 things. Is there any punishment if they do a terrible job with their procedures? Or is there, how does this effectively, is there any stick that you have that you can use on these counties given the results?
Representative, we were trying to make a balance between being very open with the counties about what they could improve on and where there were mistakes, and using a stick, which might inadvertently cause counties to not be open about their procedures, trying to avoid that. We don't have a pass-fail grade. We discuss with them things where they can improve and things that probably aren't being done right, and then discuss it openly with other counties. So it's a lesson learned for all of them. And there was nothing in the statute about providing a report each time we do these audits to anyone, but we do have the records and can provide them. They're open records.
And if I could, the question, I mean, of course, I do remember the debate back in 22, and again, that this is, I don't say exactly cutting edge, but it's not common. I mean, we're trying to be ahead of the curve on following procedural or monitoring procedural aspects of elections. My question jumps to the bill that was passed this year as a parallel with some of the reporting requirements to the Secretary of State's office from different agencies. Are there any rules and regs that you're going to have to institute for that, or is that just pretty straightforward reporting, if you don't mind a slight side issue on that?
So, Representative, there's no requirement for rules and regulations on those. DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, already sends us a quarterly report on people with temporary driver's licenses, and other agencies could do the same. And our data people would work with them to make sure that the data that comes over in a format that's useful to us. With DMV, we've improved that over several iterations to make it a much smoother process. So the data we get is easy to compare to the voter rolls.
Thank you. And when is the audit? Is it 10 days after the odd year election day? When do we see the audit being conducted?
Senator, there's no set timeline except that it must be done in an odd year, so that we'd work around the odd year elections. But again, it's 2 weeks probably to gather records and send them to us, and then 1 day on-site inspection. So we try to make it not intrusive, but we work around the county's schedules as best we can.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that the Douglas County Clerk appreciates feedback, and some of the processes have changed in terms of, you know, if you are a supervising judge and you take things back, then there's a trail of who receives that information. But you actually, I think, in the audit process are stating the timing, because it says that the all requested records have to be to the Secretary of State's audit team. Oh, it's after 21 days after the notice and 30 days after completing the first part. So what you're saying is there's no real requirement for the Secretary of State to initiate that. But once it's initiated, then the timeline is clear.
Correct, Senator. There's nothing in the regulation of the statute of when the process is initiated, but once it is, then there's set timelines to get it done, so it doesn't drag on.
Right, and thank you for the clarification. I was asking, when does the audit have to commence? And the regulation seems to speak to the audit shall occur in 2 parts and then has timing deadlines in parts A, 2, and 3, it looks like. So, okay. And so there's no, it's too late to comply with this regulation and get the audit started. It's just, it has to be completed in the odd year. So before December 31st of the odd year, sounds like. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, then thank you very much for your appearance today. I appreciate the testimony. Thank you. Next, we will hear from the Kansas Corporation Commission, Asan Latif, Litigation Counsel, and Mike Hamey, Director of Transportation. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Good morning, Chair, committee members, and thank you for the time to consider these proposed changes to these regulations. My name is Asan Latif. I'm a litigation counsel with the Kansas Corporation Commission, and Mike Hamey, the Transportation Director, is here as well. As you know, the Kansas Corporation Commission is authorized by the legislature to regulate motor carriers operating in the state of Kansas, and motor carriers operate commercial motor vehicles over 10,000 pounds. And the regulation updates that our agency has proposed allow the Kansas Highway Patrol, motor carrier inspectors, and Kansas Corporation Commission staff to ensure that motor carriers are operating in accordance with the motor carrier safety statutes, rules, and regulations, so that the roadways are safe for the motoring public. We have 3 regulations for your consideration today. The first is KAR 8241, and this regulation defines the terms that are used in the Kansas motor carrier regulations. Included among those definitions is the definition of out of service, or OOS, which is the designation that law enforcement gives to motor carriers who commit major violations of state laws requiring them to be held at roadside until a new driver or vehicle can relieve them. The definition adopts a document called the North American Standard Out of Service Criteria. That document is annually published by the CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. And the commission recently requested and received approval of this rule as a temporary regulation. Updating this regulation was a request by the Kansas Highway Patrol in order to adopt a new rule that would allow motor carrier inspectors to place a driver out of service if they cannot pass an English language proficiency test at roadside. Inspectors receive training on administering this test when a driver is unable to comply with the inspector's instructions. Prior to this rule, new drivers or drivers that failed the test would receive a citation but would not be placed out of service. That is not to say that the English language proficiency test is new. It is something that is currently administered, but as I said, it resulted in a citation. This would allow the inspector to keep the driver at roadside until a new driver could come that could pass the test, and allow the inspection to proceed. The second regulation we have is KAR 8243A. This regulation adopts portions of a federal regulation that governs hours of service rules. These types of rules instruct drivers on how to keep track of their hours they drive and limit the number of hours a driver can be on duty in a given period of time, among other things. The proposed update adopts a newer version of the federal regulation and doesn't change any substantive rules that apply to motor carriers. Similarly, on 8243D, this regulation adopts portions of a federal regulation governing safety fitness procedures. These rules establish procedures to determine the safety fitness of motor carriers. They assign safety ratings and direct remedial action when that is required, as well as prohibiting a motor carrier from operating if they have an unsatisfactory safety rating. This also adopts a newer version of the federal regulation. It doesn't change substantively any of the rules that affect motor carriers. It just adopts the 2024 version, which is still the most current version of this regulation that's published by the federal government. A public hearing is scheduled on May 14th for KAR 8243A and 3D, and a public hearing is scheduled for June 30th on 8241. And staff's hope is that we'll have permanent versions adopted shortly after these public hearings. But with that, I'm open for any questions you have, as well as the Transportation Division Director, Mike Amy, is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. Could you tell me if you have any numbers yet of how many citations have been issued and how many maybe truck drivers have been removed for lack of being able to handle the rig or redesigns?
Well, since the temporary regulation only went into effect a couple weeks ago, so we don't have as far as who's been placed out of service since that regulation went into effect. I can talk to the Highway Patrol. The Highway Patrol keeps those records of the citations that they issue, and I can report that to you in the committee as well.
I think whenever you might get some numbers, you might share them with the chair so we keep track of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the roadside inspection and the language proficiency, that's not a substantive change, is it? Or
No,
is
that's
it?
not, because that rule is in effect already. They do evaluate for that currently. It's just as to what they can do after they determine someone's failed the test.
Okay, that has changed.
That's what the new rule, the criteria allows for them to place those drivers out of service.
Okay, and that started April 1st?
Yes.
Okay, so we have kind of a short window to see what's been happening, but we'll be getting some numbers in then.
Yeah, we can determine what citations have been issued for that.
Okay, great, thank you. Committee, any other questions? Yes, Representative Corbett.
As this goes on, if the drivers are removed, is there any trail back to their employer for putting people in this position?
Yeah, out of service violations that are issued at roadside, they get mailed a fine in the mail with them, and they're not allowed to actually move the vehicle until that out of service violation is corrected. So that's why they'd have to provide a new driver that can meet the English language proficiency, or if there was a major defect to the vehicle itself, the vehicle stays at roadside until it's corrected. So there is between the fine and correcting the out of service violation, those are the two.
But for the company that has started this problem, there's no violation or penalty to them for?
No, the violation goes to the company. Violations that are found at roadside that are out of service violations are issued to the company.
Okay, thank you.
How would the company, follow-up question, how would the company prove that they have corrected the out of service incident?
For this case, they'd have to have the driver pass the English language proficiency test. They should have, if they're a CDL driver, they would have had to have passed it to get the CDL itself. And so that's determined by KDOR. But they would, in order to move the vehicle, they'd have to provide a driver at that moment to relieve that driver. And that driver would have to pass the test.
And so the company says to the Kansas Corporation Commission, we have a driver, they are going to go to the vehicle that is stopped on mile marker X at this highway, and that driver is now going to move the vehicle, and here's proof that the driver has English language proficiency. I mean, how does the process work? I'm just curious.
So usually the highway patrol member would stay with the vehicle until the driver is a new, because in this case, this inspection hasn't proceeded because they haven't been able to complete the inspection. So they would wait with the driver until the new driver arrives. Sometimes if it's at roadside and a highway, they would move the vehicle they'd follow the vehicle to a safer area for a new driver to arrive. And then they would conduct the inspection, and then the vehicle would be allowed to move. When this happens, sometimes they have to contract with somebody else to take over the load if they can't relieve the situation by bringing a new driver. Basically the vehicle is stopped and is not allowed to move until that happens.
So does that sometimes take days to get a new driver, and the trooper stays with the vehicle the whole time, or how does that work?
Usually it happens that they make arrangements with another carrier to take over the trip if they have to. They usually, the Highway Patrol works with the motor carrier on how to handle that. But the out of service violation is an indication of a safety issue that does not allow the transport to continue.
And same thing if it's a physical issue with the vehicle that needs repair and might take a couple days, then,
Yeah, then they would have to send a new driver and vehicle to take over the load. That's
okay. And surely a trooper doesn't stay with the vehicle the whole time.
They work. There's different ways to work it out. They'll try to make sure that the vehicle doesn't move, or they can make, if there's some arrangements made with the Highway Patrol. That's usually how there are ways that they handle it on roadside.
Okay, good. I mean, I want our troopers' time to be used most expeditiously and efficiently for the safety of travelers on the road. So thank you. Any other questions? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the testimony. I just want to make sure that we're clear that these are not just Kansas companies that you're investigating or inspecting. It's also out of state. Because it sounds like Kansas has been very diligent on making sure we have good players with these licenses.
That is
Could you
correct.
elaborate on that? Thank
Yeah,
you.
Senator Tyson, that is correct. The inspections happen to any motor carrier that is traveling through Kansas, and they could be motor carriers that are from other states. And that happens routinely where an out-of-service violation has put an out-of-state carrier out of service at roadside, and they have to contract with somebody locally to take over the load. So you're right, that is true.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, then thank you very much for what you do, and thank you for your testimony today. Appreciate it. Next, we will hear from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, William Carr, Director, Bureau of Water, and also available is Deputy Secretary Kate Gleason. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is William Carr. I'm the Director for the Bureau of Water at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And I'm coming to you to talk about proposed regulation for KAR 281516. This regulation is associated with public water supply system permit requirements. I'll take a step back it's been several years, but the Kansas statute 65163 authorizes KDHE to pass regs and rules for an annual certification program that would allow qualifying public water supply systems to either replace a distribution pipe or extend distribution pipe without getting a permit from KDHE. This program, for those participating in that, will reduce the time it takes between project design and start of construction, because they will not be submitting those plans and specs to Kansas Department of Health and Environment for review and approval. Additionally, this also frees up KDHE staff time, since they're not reviewing these pipe projects. They have more time to spend on more complex public water supply infrastructure projects to review. This regulation 281516 does set some criteria and requirements to participate within this certification program. Some of those requirements, criteria deal with the size of pipe. There's a restriction. You can't use this program to replace or extend distribution pipe that's over 16 inches in diameter. There's a restriction on area. If you're using the program to replace pipe, you have to replace that pipe in somewhat the general area of the existing pipe. You, of course, have to comply with minimum design standards for engineering requirements or engineering design requirements, KDHE. The public water supply systems have to have a standard specification package on file with KDHE. They also have to employ a full-time professional engineer. That engineer would be responsible for reviewing and approving these pipe projects. And that same engineer cannot be the engineer that designs the pipe projects, designs and stamps plans and specifications for that. So you need two different people doing that. You can't have the person approving it being the ones that drew up the plans and specs. There is an annual record-keeping requirement. KDHE's created a pretty simple spreadsheet template that systems would list all the projects that they approved and some details for each of those projects. And there's a requirement there that records for these plans and specs for these projects have to be provided to KDHE upon request. Kind of backing up, we started this program. We started developing the regs for this program back in 2017. There was a legislative working group that consisted of the Kansas American Water Works Association, Kansas League of Municipalities, the Kansas Municipal Utility Association, Kansas Rural Water Association, the Kansas Water Office, and the City of Wichita. They were all part of this legislative group that met several times, 2017, 2018. It was this group that really confirmed support for developing this certification program that was already in the statute. Once KDHE got behind that, we started developing the language for this regulation. Once we had a good working draft, we convened another advisory group in 2023 that had several public water supply system representatives, engineering consultant representatives, and representatives from Kansas Rural Water Association. We went through several meetings. We got feedback for those draft regulation language, and that feedback was incorporated into the language that's in front of you now for this proposed regulation. I do want to mention that this certification program is completely voluntary. There's no requirement, and there are no associated fees for participation. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions you have or the committee has.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your explanation. It seems to make good sense to me. But I want to direct your attention back to page 3 at the bottom, subparagraph 4 there, about employment of full-time qualified PE. Well, first there's the design engineer who's going to design this extension, I assume.
Correct.
Okay. And obviously the engineer, though, who does the review of this non-permitted extension or replacement is a separate PE.
Correct.
Okay. It says in the reg that the municipality must employ a full-time qualified professional engineer. Does that mean that engineer has to be an employee of the water, whatever it might be, utility or the city?
That is correct. They must be an employee of the public water supply system.
So a city could not use a separate, for example, consulting engineer to do that certification?
Not to review and approve those projects, no.
Okay. And I mean, there's a lot of cities out there that may have one professional engineer on staff. Everybody calls him the city engineer. And then there's cities like mine, Wichita, where professional engineers are running out of the pipes everywhere in that town. Okay. So my question is, how, if at all, does a small community take advantage of this program, or is it only really intended for big cities that have multiple PEs on staff?
It's really only intended for public water supply systems that already have an engineer on staff. Now, even if there's just one engineer, that does the reviewing and approving, you can still have a consultant design those
plans
plans and specs. But yes, we would not anticipate any smaller systems that don't already have an engineer on payroll to participate in this program. I doubt it would make financial sense. It's geared towards those systems that do a lot of these projects.
And finally, Madam Chair, with your leave, I assume the idea of having two different professional engineers look at this, one who stamps off and seals the design and one who does the review for the certification, is to lay two sets of presumably somewhat independent eyes upon the design before it's actually built. That fair?
That is correct. That is how KDHE does, our review
Mhm.
process. So.
Where my concern arises is, at least in my town of Wichita, both of those PEs are going to be reporting to the city engineer, also known as the Director of Public Works. And so they're not independent in a sense. They both report to the same person, whereas the certification is done through the existing process. Presumably, the PE who reviews at your office reports to the secretary, and the designer reports to either the city engineer or the city council, depending on what their model is. Do you have any concern that you could have a situation where Joe draws it, hands the plans over to Sam, who's in the office next door, he initials off, and they both go have a cup of coffee together?
Well, we do make it a point through the process that, the person responsible for reviewing those plans and specs and approving them is a named person. It's that person. So we also, because we regulate public water supply systems, we have, an enforcement authority. So if we find that someone through this program has abused it, then we would investigate and take appropriate action for that. You're asking, is that a possibility? It probably could be, but we will keep an eye on those sort of things.
I'm not saying to revise the regulation, but it just causes me concern. And finally, also in the context of where a consulting engineering design firm designs it, the city engineer, as the representative of the owner, approves the design, concerned about cost constraints and other things. And then that same city engineer, as I understand it under this proposal, could then do the independent certification review for the consulting engineer's work. And that's a little close together for my taste, but I understand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a little bit off the subject, but this week we found out in our county, Shawnee County, that they want to build a storage bank for electricity. And when you read the report, it says on the environmental study, they did it. Does KDHE get involved in databases and battery storage units? Is that a mandatory environmental light to come on for your department, or do you get involved at all?
You're asking, is KDHE involved in the environmental review?
Yes.
And it depends, there might be an environmental review depending on which KDHE program that's being constructed under, or if there's some kind of government funding might require environmental review. It's not automatic that my office would be included in those kind of reviews or notified of them unless it dealt directly with water.
So could a constituent or someone, before they have a groundbreaking, ask somebody at KDHE to get involved to do a basic look over before something good or bad could happen?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that question. It depends on whatever this facility is permitted under. If it's permitted under a KDHE program, I think that KDHE program would have a say in how they move forward.
Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Faustigedo. Senator Faustigedo. I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay,
There we
can
go.
you
We
hear
can hear
me?
you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, did you say that there was the board or group that was put together here in Wichita? Did you say it's only on a volunteer basis?
This certification program is a volunteer basis, yes.
Okay, and so is there a group that is composed already? If so, who are they?
A group of who? Are you asking if we know participants in this certification program?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
So we have started a pilot program, and there are 9 public water supplies that are participating in that. I'll name them out here: City of Hutchinson, Johnson County Rural Water District Number 7, Kansas City, Kansas Board of Public Utilities, the City of Lawrence, Miami County Rural Water District Number 2, City of Olathe, City of Salina, City of Topeka, and City of Wichita.
Okay, so you've got a well diverse group there, and that's what I wanted to know. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that the professional engineer who's designing the project would have to use their stamp on that project. Is there a similar requirement for the qualified professional engineer that is reviewing those plans? Or how would?
They have to be a professional engineer. Now, I don't think there's a requirement that they put their stamp on the approval letter, but they will have to sign the approval letter with their credentials.
They would sign the approval level.
Yes.
So there would be a record of that individual.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any, then thank you very much for your testimony this morning and for appearing in committee. Thank you. Next, we will hear from the State Board of Regents, Gage Rolfe, Associate General Counsel. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Morning. I'm Gage Rolfe. I'm Associate General Counsel for the Kansas Board of Regents. The board is proposing changes to the regulations under the Nursing Service Scholarship Act. We're proposing to modernize our regulation set. This act authorizes scholarships for students enrolled at public and independent nonprofit institutions in courses of instruction leading to licensure as licensed professional nurses or licensed practical nurses. The act requires recipients to practice in Kansas for the length of time that they receive the scholarship for, and failing that, the recipient must repay the scholarship. The act requires the board to adopt rules and regulations as necessary to administer the program. Our existing regulations were adopted in 1990 and last updated in 1992, so there have been some changes since then. We'd like to modernize these. And KAR 8820-1, we'd like to eliminate defined terms related to financial need. The FAFSA came about since these regulations were adopted, and the FAFSA calculates financial need for us. We'd like to eliminate some defined terms that have been rendered unnecessary by statutory changes that have occurred since the regulation set was adopted. And primarily, we'd like to eliminate the definition of full-time student. This combined with proposed changes to 8820-3 and 8820-9 would permit the scholarship to be awarded to part-time students and to students whose full-time programs comprise fewer than 12 credit hours. In KAR 88-20-3, we'd like to eliminate requirements that have been rendered unnecessary by statutory changes, such as requiring the student to be a Kansas resident and requiring the student to have a sponsorship agreement. And we'd like to, again, eliminate the requirement that the student be enrolled full-time. In KAR 8820-5, we'd revoke that regulation that deals with sponsorship agreements, which are no longer required under the Act. KAR 8820-8 would also be revoked. That regulation concerns prorating awards when the available funds are insufficient because the statute gives the board president and CEO the authority to determine the award amount annually. That regulation is superfluous. KAR 8820-9 college certification. We'd like to remove elements of certification that have also been made unnecessary by statutory changes. It's the Kansas resident piece. And the presently proposed regulations, which is the removal of the full-time student requirement. AR 8820-10, we're just simply substituting the word scholarship for the word grant, so that the regulation reads consistently with the act and the remainder of the regulations. And in KAR 8820-11, Financial Needs Analysis Agency, that regulation is no longer necessary, again, due to the FAFSA.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of areas of inquiry. First, I'd like to direct your attention back to 88-20-9
Sure.
and the striking of subparagraph A, resident of state of Kansas. Can you tell me about that and why and so on?
Yes, sir. In 2017, the Kansas Legislature eliminated the requirement that a nursing student be a resident of Kansas from the scholarship requirements. So that, since it's no longer a statutory requirement, we'd like to eliminate it from the regulation.
And so to help me, do these students have to be students at a school of nursing in Kansas, or could they be from some other state?
Yes, sir. They can live in another state, but they have to be a student at a Kansas public institution or a Kansas private nonprofit institution.
Okay. Let me give you an example of part of what I'm thinking about.
Sure.
Let's say someone lives in Newkirk, Oklahoma. You may not know where Newkirk is, but when I was young, it was the closest place for 18-year-olds to buy beer on Sunday. It was Newkirk, right across the state line. If somebody lives in Newkirk, can they enroll in, say, a nursing school in Wichita, 45 minutes away, get the benefit of the scholarship, then go to work at, say, one of the Wichita hospitals or in Wellington or Winfield and continue to be a resident of Oklahoma the entire time?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as they're
I'm not blaming you all. That's the statutory scheme, I'm sure, that we cooked up in 2017 when I was asleep late one night. So, okay, I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you. And before others of us were in the legislature. So anyway, any other questions? Not seeing any, then thank you very much for your testimony today and appearing in committee.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Next, we will hear from the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. We have Brock Rayler, General Counsel. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As mentioned, I'm Brock Rayler. I'm General Counsel for Office of the State Bank Commissioner. The Office of State Bank Commissioner, we regulate more than state banks. We actually do regulate consumer credit as well, which that is what these regulations are going to be covering, specifically under the Kansas Mortgage Business Act and the Uniform Consumer Credit Code. So this is the last set of regulations that we are requesting to be updated from a passing of a 2024 Senate Bill 406. And unfortunately, yes, it does take that long sometimes to get regulations updated. And there was no statutory requirement to get regulations updated, but we decided to go ahead and do so. What we did in 2024 Senate Bill 406 is we removed all the mortgages that were under the Uniform Consumer Credit Code and put it in the Kansas Mortgage Business Act. The loans that are covered are second mortgages, first mortgages over 100% of loan to value, or any first mortgage that is over 12%. That's considered a covered transaction under the Kansas Mortgage Business Act. So there were a couple other changes in that bill, of course, but for the most part, we just pulled those statutes from the Uniform Consumer Credit Code and put it in the Kansas Mortgage Business Act, because that's the act that you'd probably look to if you're trying to figure out what Kansas law covers on, say, a second mortgage. So going through the changes, I think it might be easier for me to go over all the regulations, both on Article 17 and Article 75, to try to explain how they're similar. But the first one, 1724-1, what we are doing in that one is we have a signed acknowledgement requirement. We're actually removing the signed acknowledgement portion of that requirement simply because on a mortgage closing, there is lots and lots of documents that we have the consumer sign. And the fact that the consumer is signing one more additional document, we don't feel like that is bringing it to their attention as much as we originally thought. So in effect, this comes into a gotcha for the mortgage companies because we're not having the consumer sign it. And quite honestly, I don't think the consumers are really reading it more just because they're required to sign. So now they are only required to disclose the signed acknowledgement. There is one additional requirement in that regulation that states that they need to put some language as to how a consumer can find the information about the mortgage company on the nationwide mortgage licensing system. That's actually a nationwide system that's used by 59 state and territorial non-depository financial service regulatory agencies. Obviously, there's some states with multiple agencies. And it just goes over the basic information about their license and their status in each state. So that's a requirement that they need to disclose, that a consumer can go there to access the information. And to be perfectly candid, that is where we are storing all of our licensing information. The next regulation I wanted to discuss is 1724-6, which this is updating the surety bond requirement, and we are keeping it consistent with an identical regulation, KAR 75-6-31, which is also in this, this set of regulations. And currently, the commissioner has statutory authority to set any surety bond as the commissioner wants, both in the Kansas Mortgage Business Act and in the UCCC. So we're actually proposing to limit ourselves to a maximum of 1 million. We've never even considered anything that high, but that would give us a little bit of more leeway in the future if something was to happen. The next one I wanted to talk about is 1724-7. This is a new regulation, but as I mentioned earlier, covered transactions are formerly what we used to call UCCC mortgages. So although it's considered a new regulation, it actually mirrors another regulation that we have before you as well. That is 75-6-9. So both regulations will be identical once these regulations get updated. And also in the first UCCC regulation, 75-6-9, we view that as a non-substantive change. That is identical, as mentioned before, to the previous regulation, 1724-7. But one thing we did change is in subsection C, we viewed that as a definition within a definition. So we went ahead and just changed that so it reads a little easier. 75-6-31, what we did in this one is it did cover the covered transactions or former UCCC mortgages, so we struck that language. And the language that said all other applicants, now that's only going to apply to what we call supervised lenders. That already applied anyways because they weren't engaged in the mortgage business. So it's not really a new change, we're just changing it to the licensees on the UCCC, which would include supervised lenders. Also, this one has the limit of $1 million and also has the additional language as when we can go over the minimum amount. The one difference in this one is they are subject to branch surety bonds, so it's a little different than the UCCC, I'm sorry, the KMBA for the minimum amount, but for the most part, it's identical. In 75-6-32, a previous term to this was a notification filer. When we updated the UCCC, we actually changed that term to consumer credit filer. And so we still view this as not a non-substantive change, but just matches the updated statute. And in addition, we also changed our filing date from April 30th to August 31st, which of course, if any consumer credit filer wanted to file on August 30th, we would April 30th, we would certainly allow them to do so. And the next two regulations, 75-6-36 and 37, those are actually being repealed simply because they only covered the UCCC mortgages, and we already have regulations of the Kansas Mortgage Business Act, not included here, 17-24-3 and 17-24-5. So there's no reason to create a new regulation of the KMBA. And finally, 75-6-38. This is our document retention regulation. And currently, all supervised lenders need to comply with everything, even though we don't ask for certain things on certain types of businesses. For instance, the debt collection industry, we're not requiring as much in that industry, which that sounds bad, but there's a lot of states that will allow these companies to just operate off of spreadsheets. They're buying and selling spreadsheets on consumer debt. We don't allow that in Kansas, and we never have. But at the same time, we understand that as an industry practice, the document retention isn't as much. So we're requiring the bare minimum for us to verify that the debt collection agencies do in fact have a valid debt. And that's what we're checking for in an exam anyways. So with that, Madam Chair, I certainly stand for any questions.
Thank you for the thorough presentation of some complicated regulations. Appreciate it. Representative Carmichael has a question.
Sadly, Madam Chair, it may be too. All right, let me back up just a minute. Conceptually, if I go over to Capital Federal and I buy in a new house and I take out an 80-20 mortgage, 20% equity, 80% I'm borrowing from the bank, that transaction falls under which state law regulatory scheme? Is that a UCCC?
Is it a first mortgage or?
Yeah, first mortgage, brand new. This is purchase money mortgage. I'm gonna buy a new house.
Yes, that particular transaction would fall under the Kansas Mortgage Business Act, but these regulations that you're discussing today, it would not apply because it only applies to second mortgages, loans over 100% loan to value or 12% or higher interest.
Okay, and you've gotten to what actually one of my questions was when you said 12%, you're saying a loan that has a mortgage interest rate of 12% or greater falls within KMBA?
A mortgage over 12% would fall under the existing Kansas Mortgage Business Act and the updated portion. So there are still statutes and regulations that apply to loans under 12%, but for the most part, I can't think of a single regulation that we have passed that would cover a forced mortgage. It's only statutes under the KMBA. Simply because you mentioned Capital Federal. That is a national bank. So we actually don't regulate them, not even.
You're getting down to one of my other questions was exactly which mortgage transactions do you have authority over as opposed to federal regulators?
So unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court has made it very clear we have no ability to regulate national banks. We can pass laws and regulations that somewhat govern the national transactions as long as it doesn't frustrate the national bank from engaging in those businesses. State banks on our state side do have the ability to enforce the Kansas Mortgage Business Act. But these regulations are the non-ones like Rocket Mortgage, for instance, OneMain, that are not banks that offer.
They do not have a federal charter and they may not even have a state charter, but you can still regulate them because they're in the mortgage business. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. That helps quite a bit. Let me skip all the way to the end of your presentation. You were describing the situation where mortgages or other indebtedness is sold based sometimes literally on the basis of a spreadsheet. Says the name of the debtor, maybe the original creditor, the balance due, and people will pay for that and then they'll go try to collect. You want to, through this regulation, make sure that they maintain certain records, even if it was a spreadsheet transaction, I think.
Yeah, and I have two-part answer to that.
Please.
We currently do not allow just operating on a spreadsheet. I want to make that very clear. We do require that they get the documentation in order to validate the debt. What we typically do is we'll go in one exam and we'll see the spreadsheet, and we'll tell them, if we come back and you have those spreadsheets, we're going to require that you forgive the debt. And we have gone in the second time, saw their spreadsheets, and said, okay, we told you, you cannot collect this debt. You do not have the proper documentation.
Right.
However, the documentation that we are required by statute and regulation is pretty thorough and more than what we actually would require these debt companies to have. So we do have a little bit of a light hand in that, and so we're only going to request the things that we actually look for to verify that they do have the ability to collect the debt.
And so the thrust of my question is, does the regulation describe what documents they have to retain and what you'll expect to see on inspection? Or how do they know and tell me what type of documents do they have to maintain?
Yes, that is subsection C in its entirety.
Slow down,
And-
that's in 75, 6 something when you say sub C.
I'm sorry, yeah, 638,
All right. I have-
subsection C, which
I have it.
starts,
Each licensee and consumer credit filer shall retain. Is that the one you're looking at?
yeah, on page 4.
Okay, now I'm seeing a list. Okay. Should have read that more carefully and realized that one fit with the other. I apologize. I think that.
Oh, I apologize. It's subsection D that starts on page 5.
Tell you what, in the interest of time, once I've more carefully looked at that, I will find your phone number and give you a call. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And Senator Tyson has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I know that the code, the UCC Consumer Credit Code in Kansas is contributed or helped with some of the restrictions and regulations because of the financial crisis in 2008. And I just want to make sure that you guys understand how, I know you know how important that is, but I want to make sure that we're not moving in a manner that would weaken us and to make us vulnerable in those types of situations again.
Yes, we are very cognizant of the most recent issue in 2008 and the creation of the Dodd-Frank Act. And our laws are designed to work in tandem with the federal laws as well, which that's one reason why we have very similar terms in both the Kansas Mortgage Business Act and Uniform Consumer Credit Code, because both of those loans are covered under the Federal Truth in Lending Act. And so there's a lot of commonality, and yes, we are very aware of the importance of making sure that Kansas is protected.
Thank you. And Madam Chairman, if I may, that's much appreciated because what I'm watching on the industry, and I don't have a lot of time to study it, but what I've seen are some flags that we could be setting up for similar types of vehicles or not a good situation for the nation, not necessarily Kansas. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am a little curious on this. I mean, the regulation changes are just for second mortgages and mortgages with over 12%. I mean, how many more, I mean, what percent of the market is that even? I mean, that seems like a real narrow slice of Kansas mortgages. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The exact percentage I would need to get back to you on, but you are correct. It's very rare for a first mortgage to be over 12%.
Thank you.
Just wait.
Thank you, committee. Any other questions? Not seeing any, then thank you very much for your testimony and appearing in committee today. Appreciate it. Committee, we are kind of tentatively scheduled for a morning break. 30 minutes from now, so we are ahead of schedule. And I'd entertain that we go ahead and move on unless committee would like to take a short 10-minute break. Not seeing any request for that, so we'll go ahead and see what we hear from the Department of Wildlife and Parks if they are present and ready. So they look like they have everybody here, so that's great, thank you. So we're gonna hear from the Department of Wildlife and Parks. We have Kurt Wired, General Counsel, and also I think available for questions would be Jake George, Director of Wildlife Division, and Colonel Greg Kaiser, Director of Law Enforcement Division, and also Representative Will Carpenter to speak on behalf of the commission. So with that then, please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Curtis Wired. As you said, I'm the Chief Counsel for the department, and I appreciate you doing all those introductions for me. I would just add that Representative Carpenter is here too in his capacity as one of the commissioners on the Kansas Wildlife and Parks Commission. So we're here to talk about one regulation. It's the department's fee regulation, which we are updating to reflect changes in the ongoing, I would say, subject of night vision coyote hunting. You may recall that I was here before you not too long ago, late last year, on talking about expanding the season. I laid out the history in our testimony there. And I should mention too that Chairman Dameron also submitted written testimony in favor of the changes as well. He also laid out the history in great detail about how this issue has progressed through the department. It is one of the most hotly discussed topics that we cover. There was a period in 2025 into 2026. We had 5 consecutive meetings. I apologize, I put in my testimony, we had 6 meetings. It was actually 5 consecutive meetings where the commission discussed the possibility of expanding the night vision season from January 1. It was previously January 1 to March 31. And then we were discussing when to extend it, and if so, where to extend it. And those dates kind of bounced back and forth. Did we want to move them back into deer season? Did we want to move them forward into the summer? And those discussions really bounced back and forth at each commission meeting. We had a lot of public input. Individuals showed up and expressed their opinions vociferously on both sides, pro and against expanding it. Eventually, the commission landed on, instead of moving the season from March into the summer months, they backed it up into deer season, which of course creates some, the department expressed this, created some law enforcement concerns because you're using night vision equipment around the rifle deer season. Of course, if you know anything about this equipment, it can see deer bed down pretty easily at night. So there was a concern, and Colonel Kaiser is here, and he can kind of speak to what he discussed during our commission meetings, if necessary, about poachers or people taking deer illegally during this time. So ultimately, what the commission did was move forward with backing the season up starting September 1, which is right before the beginning of the rifle deer seasons, and then extending it through. And then there's an exception built into the regulation that excludes rifle deer seasons. So you're allowed to start night vision hunting right before the deer seasons begin, and then you have to pause it while we do the rifle deer seasons, and then you can start it up again, stop it, around those rifle deer seasons, and then continue it through the winter until March 31st. Effectively, once you account for all the exceptions, we're at about a 6-month season for night vision hunting in Kansas. So with these additional concerns that were raised by the department, the commission noticed that the department was charging only a nominal fee of $2.50, just to get an idea of who was hunting with night vision equipment in Kansas, because otherwise we had no idea of how many people were doing so. To address these concerns, the commission asked the department to raise its fees on night vision so that we can both address any law enforcement concerns, help fund any law enforcement security measures that we need, and then B, also provide our wildlife division additional resources to monitor coyote populations in the state to see if this increase in night vision hunting has a dramatic effect one way or the other. And that's a brief summary. That was, I said, tacked on to the end of the discussion. We had those 5 consecutive meetings. And I should note too, during those 5 meetings, we held 3 the department held 3 individual meetings across the state, one in El Dorado, one in Junction City, one in Hayes, to talk about the extended season. And then at the end of that, we had 2 more public commission meetings where we discussed the increase in fees. And then, so I'll just leave that at that for now if the committee has any questions for me.
Thank you, appreciate it. Committee, any questions? Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. So season goes from January 1 through what, March 31st?
It was previously January 1 to March 31st, but with the extended season, it actually starts September 1 of the previous year, then extends through March 31st, excluding the rifle deer seasons.
On a note here from Whitney Dameron, it says the regulation will have a total annual direct compliance cost of approximately $184,000 to $920,000 over an initial 5-year period. It seems to be a lot of money.
Yes, Representative Carpenter. Representative Corbett.
That's the nicest thing I've ever been called.
All right. Yeah, we arrived at that number because we had been charging for the nominal fee. We came to that number by looking at the number of residents and non-residents we had here. And the amounts that were set were, quite frankly, we asked the commission, what do you want to set these at? And 25 for residents and 50 is what the commission negotiated and came to.
And the reason we're doing coyote hunting, what is our goal on this? What are we trying to accomplish?
Well, I think our director, George, can probably speak more to the exact purposes of coyote hunting, but my general understanding is it provides another sporting opportunity for hunters in this state. This is an emerging technology, night vision equipment being widely available. I will note, though, that these scopes are very expensive, especially the high-end ones can be $10,000, $15,000 a piece. So by cost comparison of this permit for what you're paying to engage in this activity is pretty minimal. But I think also there are discussions on predator control. I won't speak, since I'm not a scientist, I won't speak to the effectiveness of night vision hunting on predator control. I think going forward, the department and the Wildlife Division in particular will be studying the effects of night vision hunting on coyotes for that purpose.
Where I'm headed with that, I think it's a good program because here shortly the deer will be dropping small deer, and that's when the coyotes seem to do their most damage. But I pulled this from what South Dakota does for nesting predators. They include raccoons, skunks, badgers, possums, and red fox. And whether we talk about it today, I'd like to keep that on your radar because if they're out there, we want to do something for nesting predators to get more turkeys, pheasants, and quail. This would be a good list to add to your list. South Dakota pays $500,000 in bounties to harvest these. And I think it's a good program. And the last question I have for you on this, would landowners be exempted from this license?
Madam Chair, yes, so it depends on what the landowner is doing. I think if the landowner's hunting, the landowner would still be required to buy the permit. In fact, the numbers that we've collected since 2021, there are landowners included. It's just like a deer permit. You're exempted under KSA 32919. You don't have to have a license, a hunting license to hunt on your own land, obviously, but you still have to buy a deer permit, and that's tied to equipment-specific types of deer permits.
So basically, you'd have to have night vision equipment on your weapon to need this permit, right? I mean, if you wanted to hunt coyotes with something else at night, you could. Like I know a lot of people who use shotguns and whatever, but this would just pertain to equipment for night vision equipment on your weapon.
Yes, this applies to night vision equipment on a rifle to hunt coyotes at night.
My last question. I wish you would reconsider the landowner problem, because for the taxes they pay, there ought to be some privilege to harvest the coyotes they've got on their own place, but I thank you.
Thank you. And the representative covered one question I had, that what kind of animals are we talking about that this, the night hunting equipment permit would cover? Is it only coyotes?
Correct, Madam Chair. The KAR, what is it, 11525, or sorry, 5-1 specifies that that allows this equipment to be used only for coyotes. So currently in Kansas, I know that there are, as Representative Corbett mentioned, some other states where I believe raccoons and other animals are included in night vision hunting, but not so in Kansas.
Is that something that the commission is looking at, or the department is looking at?
I think it was raised a few times in discussion, but not seriously. The focus of the discussion has been the length of the season. It seems that most states, when they enter into this round, they first address the length of the season and any fees, and then species-oriented take is kind of the next step. So I could see it coming to the forefront.
Thank you. And when you mentioned that the commission negotiated that these would be the fees to be charged, what do you mean by negotiate? Is that just internal discussions amongst the commissioners, or who's involved?
No, Madam Chair, I just meant, perhaps that's not the best way to put it, but in the open meetings that we're having where the commission is holding their business out in front of the public as they're legally required to do, there was that's my way of explaining, there were discussions open discussions amongst the commissioners of, should we move this into the summer? And individuals would come up to the podium and speak and say, no, we don't like that because of this. And the commissioners would talk amongst themselves openly and say, well, what about backing it up or moving it forward here, moving it there? There was a very long deliberative process, I would say, at the commission on when this should occur.
Thank you. And then we have questions from Senator Faustigodo.
Madam Chair, my question's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. And next questions from Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I kind of want to jump on what Representative Corbett said. And I know you made a comment about hunting as if it's for pleasure, but for most of us landowners, this is maintenance out here. That, I mean, these critters, for lack of a better term, are harmful to our herds and to product that we're trying to raise out here. So I don't think that Wildlife and Parks has been real receptive to that and aware of it. Maybe there needs to be some handshaking between the Department of Agriculture and actual landowners that are living this burden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to just add too, and this was going to my earlier clarification with Representative Corbett about what the question is, whether they're hunting on their property versus, we do have animal damage control permits that the department issues. So when there are situations where, say, coyotes or other animals are causing damage and are being a nuisance animal damage control, that's what I was trying to put together, the department does issue those to landowners that allow them to take animals that are causing problems.
And if you're going to do that on your own property, you then have to have a permit before you harvest those?
Madam Chair, so that issue came up shortly before I came over here. I think what we understand is if they're hunting, if they're saying that we are going to hunt coyotes, that they would need the permit because the regulation says each person who's hunting. I have to admit, I don't have a straight legal answer on if they are just doing it for nuisance control, because typically for a nuisance control permit, landowners are exempted from needing a nuisance control if critters are causing problems on their property. So I can research that further and provide an answer to the committee.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. Next questions from Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am very curious again, I'm not really a hunter, so this is a little, but is there any data as far as on night hunting, as far as the number of accidents, that people have, as far as it being any more dangerous than just normal hunting, from just a public safety concern?
That, Representative, I wouldn't have an answer to. I might have to look to our division director. or perhaps Colonel Kaiser as well might have something.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome.
Thank you. Jake George, I'm the Wildlife Division Director, excuse me, out of Pratt. Data from other states is, there's not a ton of it. It's kind of emerging technology. There are some known accidents, but they are minimal compared to the number of folks that are out there. So overall, with the review, it was seen as fairly safe practice.
Just, compared to just standard hunting during the daylight hours, I mean, is it more or less than that, marginally more, marginally less?
I would say similar. What you find more of is potential for mistaken identity. A lot of these higher end thermal scopes are really easy to identify. Some of the lower end, not so much. So you do see some harvest of unintentional harvest of species that aren't. So
All right, no, thank you. I just, a question that popped in my head. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Carmichael.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but I got several, and I'm sorry, you got too far away. Apologize. Mistaken identity? You're talking about people with high-powered rifles in the dark shooting the wrong thing?
Make sure you speak into the microphone so we can.
Is that
hear you.
correct?
Thank you.
yes, that's what I'm saying.
I guess that's people who are hunting for coyotes and shoot deer or small children or what?
No, generally not deer, small children. There's
Well, that's good.
or bobcats. As unintentional harvest. I think we've had a report of an owl. Any specific examples, I would probably defer to Colonel Kaiser on any cases that they've pursued with respect to that. But they are few and far between compared to the number of coyotes that are harvested.
Okay, well, how many hunters are there out there roaming around in the woods with nods and permits or whatever to hunt these animals now? Because you say it doesn't happen very often, but my guess is there aren't a whole lot of hunters out doing this either.
As far as the permits that we've sold, it's ranged between 5 to I think 7,000 was the most that we'd sold.
Wow. Okay. I appreciate those answers. I need to back up with your leave, Madam Chair. Counselor, I want to make sure I understand what we're doing here. These regs, do they only apply to hunting at night?
Correct, Representative.
During the daytime, if I want to go out and shoot coyotes, can I do that essentially year-round?
Correct. The season for daytime coyote hunting is year-round.
So what we're talking about is limiting, if you will, the season for night hunting of coyotes.
Correct.
The idea being that there are some people who like to take deer at night, and I know some of them, who like to take deer at night, and it makes it real hard to enforce if people can legally be out there with nods and high-powered rifles saying, I'm hunting for coyote, and there's no way for the enforcement officer to know otherwise unless he happens to be there when the rifle goes off, finds the deer down in the middle of the night and puts 2 and 2 together in general terms. Is that right?
Yes, Representative. I think you've encapsulated well the department's concerns when this season was backed up around deer season. But since it excludes deer season, if a law enforcement officer comes across an individual during a rifle deer season with this equipment out in the field, you're going to know that they're out there illegally poaching.
Because there's nothing you can legally take.
Correct.
Okay. And so the other thing is the only thing we allow night hunting of right now in Kansas is coyote?
Correct.
Well, just let me note, Madam Chair, that I have always been steadfastly opposed to night hunting on safety grounds and what I consider to be sporting grounds and just good common sense. And I still don't think night hunting is a good idea, but the legislature chose not to hear my bills, which would ban night hunting. So be careful in the woods out there.
Thank you, Representative Wagner. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up. Oh, okay. Okay, well, I'm very talented, I suppose, so.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do want to follow up. I mean, do you ever have any human injuries or fatalities with night hunting? I mean, I guess that would be the real rub on safety. A person, being misidentified as an animal, somebody, does that ever happen?
I have not heard of any, but I will let Colonel Kaiser speak to that question.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself and welcome.
Madam Chair, my name is Greg Kaiser. I'm the Colonel of the Law Enforcement Division, Director of Law Enforcement. To answer the representative's question, we have not had any instances to this date of accidents involving humans. There's always a risk shooting at night, knowing your target. As Kurt mentioned earlier, or Jake, one of them mentioned earlier about the level of the scopes. Some of these scopes are military grade, $15,000, $20,000 scopes that are really advanced. Some of the lower end ones, it just depends on the grade, what they can see. So we've had no instance here. It's such a new thing that we haven't dealt with that yet.
Thank you. Representative Corbett. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a good program. It gives something for the state to do, and I think it'll go further than this. But adding more critters might help. But I think with the number of critters out there for coyotes and stuff, and people in the ranch business losing calves this time of the year, anything you can do to kind of keep things going is good. And I'd like to thank you for helping me get my youth license through the gamblet, and thank you.
Thank you. And just one more clarification question from me that came up with some other questions. The only thing that you would need a license for if you're hunting at night is if you are hunting with particular night hunting equipment. Is that right? And you wouldn't really otherwise be able to hunt at night unless you had equipment to do so. Do I have that correct, or?
Yes, Madam Chair. In essence, there's only one species that's allowed to be taken at night currently in Kansas, and that's coyotes during this specific season. Whether you need a hunting license on top of that depends on whether you're a landowner or you're leasing the land. If you are, by statute, you're exempted from having the hunting license. So you wouldn't need a hunting license for that. But otherwise, if you're out hunting somebody else's property at night for coyotes, you need both a hunting license and a night vision or night hunting permit.
And if you're otherwise able to see the coyote at night because the light is motion activated on the lamppost there and the light comes on and you see the coyote, are you allowed to harvest that coyote?
I believe that's the legal shooting hours. I'm trying to remember if the legal shooting hours apply to coyotes as well. They do not. Okay, thank you, Jake. No, so yes, you could take it in that. If they're like underneath, I see like out by the barn and you can see the light there.
The light comes on.
Yeah, after hours.
Right, and that's kind of more the nuisance that we're talking about. So you're not particularly out there hunting, but you're trying to abate the nuisance, I suppose. So, but thank you very much. Any other questions? Representative Carmichael.
The chair's insightful questions unfortunately inspired more on my part. So if I get myself a hunting license, can I go out all year long and night hunt coyotes so long as they don't use nods? I'll just use the light of the moon, or maybe even better, I'll just sound shoot them at night. Is that allowed?
Madam Chair, yes, you can call coyotes in for sure. So that's a common practice.
Then you shoot at a rustle in the bushes and you hope it's not somebody's kid. Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for your testimony, your presentation today, and for being present. And we had a lot of folks here this morning from the Department of Wildlife and Parks, including one of the commissioners, so appreciate the availability if there are any questions that arose from the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, we are now on track for our short morning break. We're actually ahead of schedule because we have our Department of Wildlife and Parks regulations having been heard already. So let's take just a 12-ish minute break if we can, and we'll come back at 10 till noon, if that works. We'll see you after the recess. Thank you. All right, the committee will come back to order. Appreciate everyone standing by during our recess and for continuing our work. So with that then, we will hear from the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission, and we have James Bain, General Counsel, and also I think available is Randy Evans with Government Relations Manager, who is the Government Relations Manager, and DJ Lopez, Director of Gambling. So with that, please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Senator. James Bain, General Counsel, Kansas Racing Gaming Commission. I appreciate you introducing my colleagues. And so when you were reviewing these sports wagering regulations, if you were thinking that you had just seen these during the legislative session, you were right. We were one of the first agencies, and these were one of the first sets of regulations to go through the economic impact statement ratification process. So we testified in front of both the Senate and House, Fed and State. The ratification bill passed the Senate the first time, 39-0. It had to come back to the Senate as part of the conference committee. There were no changes, but you know how the House handled the bills at the end of the session. When it came back to the Senate, it passed the Senate 39-1. On the House side, the ratification passed 99-25. And so now we may be the first agency to go through the ratification process and find ourselves before this committee. So the one thing that we testified to in House committee was the fact that these regulations have largely been in place since sports wagering launched in 2022. There are a few changes. Those changes have been voluntarily followed by the industry for quite some time. These regulations were actually, the permanent regulations were actually completed in early 2024, but we had to get legislative ratification, and so we could not get in front of the legislature until this session in 2025. So these regulations have been voluntarily followed since 2022. We've had, I think I counted 8 public hearings, opportunity for Kansans to testify. We've never had any negative testimony or any comment from Kansans during any of those 8 public hearings on these regulations that have taken place over the last few years, the temporary regulations, all the way through being in front of the House and Senate during this session. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'm gonna comment quick summaries on all 40 regulations, and I may pause for questions after 5 or so.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that so that we can have the opportunity for any questions from committee. So after every 4 or 5, we'll pause for questions.
Thank you. So KAR 112-201-1 gets into definitions that are used throughout Article 201. KAR 112-201-2 establishes accounting controls required for the retail sportsbook. KAR 112-201-3 requires lottery gaming facilities or the sports wagering platform to maintain a reserve of not less than $500,000 or an amount necessary to pay off winning wagers. KAR 112-201-4 establishes requirements for issuing and voiding sports wagering tickets. KAR 112-201-5 establishes requirements for accepting payments for wagers, providing event information, and verifying patrons' identities consistent with Kansas statute.
Let's go ahead and pause there. That's 5. Committee, any questions? I have a couple of questions on 112-201-5, general wagering requirements, and particularly the verifying patrons' identities and ages. And I think that's on page 3 of the regulation itself in subsection K. And particularly K, I guess 2 and 3. You know, we heard a lot of testimony this session, particularly in the Senate, about age verification for online activity. And so tell me how that works in the sports wagering arena.
This may be a good question for DJ.
So, DJ.
If you'll go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome.
Sorry, Madam Chair and committee members. DJ Lopez, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. I'm the director of gambling, which incorporates sports wagering as well. So platforms are connected to a Know Your Customer company. And when an account is made, that Know Your Customer company's portion of the platform, they have to put pertinent information in, names, date of birth, social security number, all the things that you would have to use to set up an account. And then also, they have you take a picture of the driver's license that you have to make sure to verify that's who you are, and other things that go into that. So there's a Know Your Customer company that's connected to those platforms.
And you said Know Your Customer?
Yes, that's it's acronyms KYC, but it's a Know Your Customer. So it's like, I believe I'd have to go back and look at all of the different platform providers that provide that, but there's several different companies out there that do that.
Is that a term of art, Know Your Customer, just like, I guess in subsection K2, reasonable standards? I mean, are we talking about, like I said, an industry term of art, Know Your Customer?
Yes, so I mean, not only does sports wagering utilize that, there's other platforms that utilize it too. You know, your banking, anything to set up an account mobilely utilizes Know Your Customer companies.
And then who's responsible then for subsection 3, details of age and identity verification shall be kept in a secure manner? Who has to keep it in a secure manner? The entity, the app that's receiving the wager?
Yes, it would be the Know Your Customer company and the platform to keep it private.
And are there consequences if they don't?
So later on in the regulation, you will see the requirements that they have security audits annually. And so, yes, if information was not secure, or if they were failing the security audits, there would be a regulation violation and potentially penalty.
Thank you. And are there any other questions for those 5 regulations? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was a member of the Fed and State Committee, and we heard this. So another issue that the Fed and State Committee talked about was gold and gold equivalents, or being able to transact that. So I'm just looking under the general wagering requirements 112-201-5. Is that a possibility? Could that be considered, or maybe that, yeah, payments that are allowed? Would that be an online and mobile application payment system that supports online money transfers?
Not at this time. The Kansas Lottery actually approves the process for that. Any kind of payment processors or any kind of monies that would be transferred into that. But at this time, no.
I'm actually glad to hear that.
Thank you. Other questions? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually had sort of a similar line of reason or questioning that the chairman brought up about age verification and such. And so if you can tell me, how often is that an issue that you're having, people try and access sports wagering who are not yet 21? I mean, is that?
I don't think we are.
Would you know?
Well, we would hear about it. Our law enforcement division would investigate if there was a person illegally gambling underage. However, we don't get those cases reported because the platforms catch it. They have systems designed that DJ outlined that catch when a youth is trying to sign up.
Okay. And if I can, in the same, the Section 5 regulations, it talks about suspension of patron's account discovered to be providing access to fraudulent patrons. I presume that's like an adult who's trying to, whatever, have some kids. Is that, is that something that happens, or are they able to nip it in the bud?
Yes, sir. Sometimes adults' accounts are utilized by kids or their children. We've found that. We've seen that. We've been notified by the platform, and they shut those accounts down.
I see. So the entire account gets shut down?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, just, again, I know there's a lot of concern with sports wagering and just the addictive nature of it. And the younger these people get caught into it, kind of the worse it goes. So very good.
Sir.
Is there any special look or enforcement? I hear a lot about college age, the students there, and a lot of sports wagering, and a lot of the student population at our campuses is under 21 years of age. So is there any particular geofencing that's done? There has to be geofencing because you have to be in Kansas to participate in sports wagering in Kansas. So is there any special look at those areas?
There is not special geofencing for college campuses. However, there are unregulated and, I would argue, illegal online sites that may be offshore sites that our agency or the Attorney General, we would never have the power to shut down a site that is based in another country. And so we know that is a problem. We know there's called prediction markets. You may have heard this term used. Prediction markets are regulated by the federal government, working its way through the courts. We have not started litigation here in Kansas. Several other states, maybe 10 or 15 other states, have gone to litigation over these prediction markets. Those are typically 18 they would not call it gambling, but to put money on these trading platforms is typically 18, again, unregulated by the state.
Thank you. And we do have some questions from Senator Faust-Godot.
Madam Chair, thank you. Regarding the same line of questioning, so if in fact there is an underage individual making a bet, is there a record kept of that, and are you privy to it?
Yes.
Yes, so.
Let's go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry. DJ Lopez again, Director of Sports Wagering and Gaming and Gambling, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. So yes, there is, also under my directorship, I oversee the White Collar Crime Unit, which is $750,000 of the first year's sports wagering goes to funding our White Collar Crime Unit, and it's split between KRGC and the Attorney General's office to combat those types of crimes. And that would fall under these types of crimes. It would get sent to us by the platform. Notification would be sent to us. We would open a case on it, and then we would look into it. Our White Collar Crime Unit would.
Surely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions except from Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it lunch? Yeah, you shouldn't have looked this way. Know your customer sites. Okay. Contrary to what some of my colleagues might believe, I've never been on a know your customer site, so I don't have anybody that certifies that I'm 18 or 21 to look at whatever I want to look at or gamble or all those things. But if I want to sign up for sports wagering, I've got to go through one of these know your customer type sites to verify that I'm at least 21 years of age. Is that the concept?
Well, it happens in the background. You don't know that it's happening. So you go to the sports platform that you choose to use and sign up through them.
Okay.
In the background is this verification.
And so help me understand, what do I have to have then in order to sign up?
Physically, I think you just need to have
My
an
dad's driver's
identification.
license. Just need to have my dad or mom's driver's license.
I think some of them make you take a photograph of yourself.
Yes, DJ Lopez again. Some of those sites require a picture at the time of the account being made, an active picture at that.
And when you say some, that infers that some don't?
Well, I think everybody has transitioned to those types of clearing up those types of gaps, and they are now all on.
Do these regulations clear up that gap and require that the Know Your Customer site obtain a photograph of the person who claims to be the same person on the driver's license that's being submitted? Do these regulations require that, or are we just depending on an industry practice by at least some of the companies with some of the people who want to gamble?
I believe it's governmental ID, and then it is an extra step in their process to provide a picture.
It's an extra step, but is it a required step under the regulations?
I don't believe it is a required step, but it is in the platforms, it is in their best interest to make sure no one underage is gambling.
Why isn't it required under the regulations that I submit not only my dad's driver's license, but my picture to try to prove that I'm the person who owns the driver's license rather than my dad? Why isn't that a part of the regulation? I mean, it seems to be kind of basic to me.
I mean, the regulation does require full age and identity verification must be undertaken. And so I think there's an argument to be made if we had a platform that was caught allowing underage individuals to create accounts and gamble, that would be a regulation violation and sanctions could be levied by the commission.
But the regulation does not require that at the time a juvenile commences gambling, that they provide anything more by way of identification than their dad's driver's license and his social security number. They don't require any verification that the person who is accessing the gaming platform is in fact the person who has submitted the identification to prove their age, as far as I can tell.
I think that is correct, other than the general full age and identity verification that must take place.
But that phrase, full age and identity verification, does not include a photograph of the person who is seeking access, as far as I can tell.
I would agree with that.
Okay. I think that's a serious flaw, and I think you all ought to think about fixing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Not seeing any, let's go ahead and take a look at the next 5 regulations, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. KAR 112-201-6 requires the platforms to take measures to prevent multiple wagers which circumvent anti-money laundering and state and federal regulations. KAR 112-201-7 prohibits structured wagering, which is similar to multiple wagering, but a strategy used to circumvent anti-money laundering and federal and state law. KAR 112-201-8 establishes requirements for how the platforms handle personally identifiable information. KAR 112-201-9 establishes requirements for payment of winning wagers. KAR 112-201-10 requires commission approval for the voiding of wagers. And that is 5 regulations.
Okay. We just took a look at KAR 112-201-6 through 10 on the, if you look at the first 2 pages of your packet. But any questions? Tell me for a minute about 112-201-8. And we were talking about the personally identifiable information that's on page 1 of the regs, subsection C. And so there are some uses, geolocation, which we kind of talked about. You've got to be in the state of Kansas. And then is that all, that can be, you can elect to have that information prohibited from collecting it?
That's right.
Well, don't they keep it because you've signed up for that account, and the next time you go on to the account, your information's still there, or how does that work? So how can you prohibit the collection of the personally identifiable information yet maintain your account? So you have, I don't know, you have a username and a password that auto-populates on your device, and so it would have to remember something, right?
DJ Lopez, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. The geofence companies have a specific number that the platforms provide to them for each account, so they don't get the PII information.
Okay, it's just a number. It's not any of the personally identifiable information. Okay,
ma'am.
thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions? All right, I don't see any, so let's have the next set of 5, please.
KAR 112-201-11 gets into reporting of suspicious activity and requirements of the platform or lottery gaming facility on when they are to report suspicious activity, how many days, and how those investigations get started. KAR 112-201-12 establishes the requirement that establishes requirements for loyalty programs and prohibits practices that would guarantee winning wagers for certain players. KAR 112-201-13 requires wagering to be conducted within the state of Kansas and establishes record-keeping requirements regarding the geolocation. KAR 112-201-14 outlines how wagers can be made and establishes a process for withdrawing of funds, including situations where a platform could withhold funds for to investigate suspicious behavior, and that patron is required to be notified and kept up to date on the investigation into their activity. And I'll do one more. KAR 112-201-15 establishes requirements for house rules, including the fact that house rules must be approved by the KRGC executive director.
Thank you. Any questions? I have one overall question. What was the bill number that, as this ratification process took place through the session this year?
It was changed a couple times. It started off as SB 502 is what it started off at. It ended up as House Sub 356. 356 or 352? Oh.
Go ahead, Representative
apologize.
Carmichael.
I didn't wear my hearing aids today. What was the last citation, please?
356.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's look at the next set.
KAR 112-201-16 establishes that the executive director may assign staff and the platforms must allow staff the ability to access books, records, and emails. KAR 112-201-17 requires the sports wagering platforms to create and maintain records. KAR 112-201-18 18 establishes requirements for ticket writers and sports wagering kiosks that are at the lottery gaming facilities. KAR 112-201-19 establishes requirements for the vouchers or tickets you receive when you place a physical wager at a lottery gaming facility. KAR 112-201-20 sets up requirements for providing a process for patron disputes and how those disputes are addressed.
All right, well, that was another 5. Any questions? Not. Yes, Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The question about patron disputes, so how exactly, I mean, is there some, mediation? There's some, it goes, who actually resolves complaints? It's, the administration, whatever, administrative department, or is this something within your division?
DJ Lopez, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. Yes, that falls to our agency. Whenever a patron dispute or complaint comes in, we document it, and then we look through to see what the issues are, and then we try to mitigate it and then assist to make sure that the patron is happy with the outcome of it.
I can ask. And so, we're a couple years into sports wagering. I mean, how often does that happen? I mean, how many of these disputes you end up with in a year?
I apologize. I don't know the number. I can check and get back with you, but it's substantial. We have an individual that's not an auditor, but a analyst for us, and he takes care of all those. And there's a process in place where they have 7 days in which to answer. The platforms have 7 days in which to answer to the complaint or the dispute, and to mitigate it or get it taken care of. And if not, then it comes back to us, and we review it and we make the decision on where it goes from there. So,
thank you.
Thank you. And one follow-up question regarding that. So in that same regulation, it says that the lottery gaming facility managers and the platform provider must include a notice or link to advise patrons of their right to make the complaint, and how the complaints may be filed, how they're going to be resolved, and how the patron may submit a complaint to the commission. So where is all that contained? That's in the fine print, in the user agreement when you sign up for these wagering accounts? Is that where the information is provided?
There is signage posted at, when you go to a lottery gaming facility. And I believe online, it's pretty prominent on when you sign in, that the activities are regulated by the state of Kansas. I believe it gives an email address or some information on contacting KRGC on the app.
Okay, so that's on the app, and you said there's a poster or a signage of some sort if it's an in-person wagering facility?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then Representative Carmichael had a question or two.
I do, and thank you, Madam Chair. You've got to part of what I was concerned about. This 7-day rule you mentioned, that's 7 days for the operator of the book to resolve the complaint, or what is that 7 days you just mentioned?
yes, sir. That's DJ Lopez, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. Yes, sir, that is correct. We give the platform or the company or the lottery gaming facility manager 7 days in which to remedy their complaint or the situation or the dispute.
Is that pursuant to law, rules, and regulations, or an internal policy?
It just coincides with the other complaint process at the brick and mortar casinos.
Is that other complaint process at the brick and mortar casinos one that arises by virtue of law, regulation, or your policy?
I believe regulation under the KELA standards.
So what you refer to as the KELA standards require resolution within 7 days, and that standard applies to both online wagering as well as in-person betting at a physical book.
Yes, sir.
And then is there any rule or regulation that addresses how long your agency may take in order to resolve the complaint?
No, sir. But we do try to get that dispute taken care of as soon as we can, as possible.
Yeah, and I understand that some complaints may be more complex and may require actual physical investigation, et cetera. So I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to figure out the scheme. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, go ahead.
I left off at KAR 112-201-21. This establishes requirements for internal controls for floor plans and the conduct of in-person sports wagering. KAR 112-201-22. This incorporates sports wagering exclusion into the current gaming exclusion list for the voluntary exclusion program that we have within our agency. This brings sports wagering within that program. KAR 112-201-23 allows the executive commission or the executive director and the commission to grant regulatory waivers for Article 201. KAR 112-202-1 requires a third-party risk management company to be engaged in sports wagering and regulations regarding those risk management companies. And KAR 112-202-2 establishes requirements for sports wagering registrants to be registered with the KRGC.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you. On 201-23 waiver requirements, at least as I look at the black letter, it says that the rules and regulations applicable to sports wagering may be waived by the commission. I think in your oral testimony, you said they are waived by the director. Does the commission consider these requests for waiver, or is it an authority that in some way has just been delegated by the commission to their executive officer to act on their behalf? How does that work?
No, I misspoke. The commission votes on their monthly meeting.
Okay.
The commission votes on the waiver
Waivers
request.
require actual commission consideration and voting, even if it's on a consent agenda or otherwise.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Next is KAR 112-203-1, regulates communication technology that is used by the platforms. KAR 112-203-2 outlines the process for changes that the platforms would like within their platform. KAR 112-203-3 establishes requirements for record keeping, confidentiality, encryption, audits, and other security features of the applications. KAR 112-203-4 outlines requirements for electronic asset disposal. That way it can be confirmed that the electronic assets are wiped of personally identifiable information. And KAR 112-203-5 requires that the server that the wagers are stored on be located in Kansas. Since the wagers have to be placed within Kansas, there's nothing that allows wagers to go across state lines.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Wagner.
Final requirement regarding the location of the servers, how do they just affirm that they have them in Kansas, or how do you actually, how can you enforce that regulation?
DJ Lopez, Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. So each of the platform is required to put a server in a data center. There are data centers around the state of Kansas. One is in Olathe in Kansas, and that's where the majority of them are located.
Thank you. Not seeing any further questions. Please proceed.
KAR 112-203-6, this gets into the geofence requirements and all the standards that are required of the whatever geofence company that they contract with, the platforms contract with. This regulation gets into those standards. KAR 112-203-7 requires testing of functionality by an independent testing lab, and this regulation sets out the standards that the platforms and equipment must undergo. And KAR 112-203-8 establishes the authority of the commission to grant regulatory waivers of Article 203. KAR 112-204-1 establishes revenue audit procedures. KAR 112-204-2 establishes the reporting requirements of reporting of revenue requirements. And KAR 112-204-3 requires annual integrity and security audits. This is designed to protect your information and confirm that that your information is not susceptible to attack.
Okay, we're going to take a break. That was 6 of them, I think. But so any questions on those 6? All right, not seeing any. Let's have those last 4 then.
Final few, yes. KAR 112-204-4. This establishes requirements for contests. They're called pools under the statute that the sports wagering authorizes what's called pools, but they're really contests, sports wagering contests. And so this gets into those activities and the regulations around them. 112-204-4 requires internal audits or additional audits as required by the commission. Again, audits dealing with internal processes. KAR 112-204-6 outlines requirements for external audits and financial audits conducted by an independent certified public accountant. And KAR 112-204-7 authorizes the commission to grant regulatory waiver for Article 204.
Thank you. Well, that was all 40. And just to clarify the record, I think you called 112-204-5. I think you misspoke and said 112-204-4. So just wanted to make clear that you had covered the regulation that was 112-204-5.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, any questions on the last 4 or circling back to any of the prior? Not. Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Financial impact statement, fair game?
Yes, or any questions about the economic impact statement? Yes, Representative Carmichael.
I think if I understand what you said at the outset, this reg had to actually go through the full process and didn't fall within the $1 million or $3 million exception to the overall cost of the reg to businesses, et cetera.
So these regulations did result in, or estimate to result in, more than $1 million in costs to the platforms or lottery gaming facilities in the first 5 years of implementation. There were no costs to consumers or to local governments.
Okay. And help me, what was the total cost?
I believe per year, the total
cost that was described in the economic impact statement. I think annual implementation and compliance costs $297,306, I think.
$1.485 million over the first 5 years.
And that's over 5 years, so we do a little quick division. I'm looking at your economic impact statement, sub F, shows $297,306 a year.
That,
Is that the yearly cost?
yeah, if that's what the economic impact statement says.
Okay. And all of this is borne by the sports book operators one way or another.
Yes.
And when you went through the rules and regulations process and the financial impact, additional hearings, et cetera, did you receive objections in that process from the sports book operators or other people to the amount that this was going to cost?
We did not. We had the economic impact statement public hearing at a commission meeting, and there were no objections from the platforms. I think they understand that this technology, as you saw in the regulations, there's a lot of technology involved.
Right.
I think,
and I'd make the same assumption that they've got a profitable business and they're willing to pay this for the privilege of doing that business in our state. Was there any testimony at all when you went through the economic impact statement hearing? And I'm not being critical, but you're the first person I've seen who's actually had the courage to go through. Your agency is the first agency I've seen that hasn't found some way to get around it. So I'm trying to find out. Was there a hearing? Lots of people showing up say this is a grand idea. Did anybody show up? Because part of what I wonder is whether all this additional level of bureaucracy is actually necessary.
there was no testimony. I mean, I think we would take pride in the amount of engagement we did over this. In my opening, I talked about 8 public hearings from the temporary through the hearing we had in the House. There were 8 public hearings. I think, and you know, we're always available by email and phone. We certainly took comment from the platforms, and a lot of what you see here came from those meetings. But as far as the economic impact statement, there was no testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And if I can point out one other thing on the cost, the platforms and the lottery gaming facilities pay KRGC costs. KRGC is fee funded, and so I just want to make that clear as well.
The enforcement costs incurred by the agency are charged to or paid for, if you will, by the sports book operators, the casino operators, et cetera.
White collar crime fund.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear in the EIS, that subsection F also, the current estimates, it's the last paragraph there. Current estimates show that $120 million in total sports wagering revenue will be generated in both fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026. So that's $120 million each fiscal year, right? And then the state of Kansas receives 10% of the revenue, while the lottery gaming facilities retain 90%. So those are the in-person places as well as the online platforms?
That's correct.
Okay. And then it says, yeah, KRGC's costs are covered by the gaming facilities and the White Collar Crime Fund. Okay, any other questions?
Representative Carmichael, I may be able to address one question you'd asked. The 200, when we wrote the economic impact statement, there were 6 platforms in Kansas. By the time we got to legislative ratification, there were 7. And so that may be why this 297 went up after the economic impact statement, because a new platform came into Kansas during that time.
I appreciate that explanation. And Madam Chair, that just causes me to think that if we had 6 platforms, now we got 7, that this business seems to be prospering in our state. And I think it's about time for the state to become a larger partner in the activity and collect more than 10% of the handle. But that's for another day. Thank you.
Let me follow up, if I may, still in that subsection F of the economic impact statement. The second paragraph of the answer at the top there says, the largest long-range economic impact could come if the Kansas City Chiefs or Kansas City Royals relocate to Kansas. Okay, first of all, that statement seems outdated for today. So when was the EIS generated?
It was in late 2023.
So late 2023. And there's been
Oh,
no
it must have
other
been-
economic impact study since then for this?
No, I'm sorry, late 2024
Late 2024.
is when the economic impact statement went to the Department of Budget. It was after that approval is when we needed to come to the legislature. And so we could not get into the 2025 legislative session. And so we had to wait until the 2026 legislative session to go through the ratification process.
So how do we know your EIS is accurate and up to date? I guess it's up to date as of late 2024?
Yes.
Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Oh, late 2025? No, 2024. Okay.
When we submitted it to the Department of Budget, then they approved it.
Okay, and then the next sentence says 80% of the taxes collected from sports wagering are deposited into the Attracting Professional Sports to Kansas Fund, which would help pay off star bonds used to build a new stadium for either or both franchises. So where are we today with that statement?
And I believe that continues to be true, that deposit to the Attracting Sports Fund is still being made.
Okay, and then your statement, this would result in several $1 million in economic impact to Kansas, is still accurate?
Yes.
Okay, and then your next paragraph talks about another long-range impact would likely be evident if the state of Missouri legalizes sports wagering. The issue is up for a vote on November 5th, 2024.
And so Missouri passed sports wagering at that time. They launched sports wagering December 1st, 2025.
And is then your economic impact statement taking into account that since December 1st, 2025, the state of Missouri has had legalized sports wagering?
No.
So it doesn't take into account?
No.
Okay, well then does the commission still stand by its economic impact statement that's been submitted for these regulations? How do we know they're accurate? They're certainly kind of not up to date, but Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think you've kind of pinpointed a frustration that we deal with in a number of different committees. But I can't blame the Racing and Gaming Commission. What we've put in place is a long process of checks, balances, file this report, get it approved here, then run it over here. When it takes 2 years to get in this case, an economic impact study before the legislature, and then we meet part-time anyway, we only meet 3 months a year. We can't expect up to the minute timeliness as in a 24-hour news cycle. This takes 2 years to develop. So I would contend that the agency will probably stand by their economic impact study as it stood 2 years ago when they started this thing.
Kind of a snapshot of what things
Bingo.
looked like when you first went down this road. So something for the legislature to keep in mind as these things come up. So, well, thank you for your presentation and your testimony. If there are no other questions, not seeing any, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, there are no other regulations before us today, so wanted to take a few minutes to see if there were any suggestions or requests for our report. And we'll start then with the Emergency Medical Services Board. Any comments or requests or suggestions for the report? I'm not seeing any for the Secretary of State or the Kansas Corporation Commission. Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think for the Secretary of State that they might consider outlining the information from the audit for the legislature.
All right. Is there any objection to making that a request of the Secretary of State? All right, Representative Wagner and then Representative Carmichael.
Yeah, I certainly concur. I think you kind of have these reports that could be very helpful to the legislature. I would tend to say you might even want to specify Senate to House Elections Committee, because they're the ones who really focus on election issues. I don't know, Senate, Fed, and State, I suppose you guys would.
Yeah, I think those would be helpful to those committees. Yes, Representative Carmichael.
I was going to say, Madam Chair, that I'd already made an open records request and that I didn't need that open request responded to, but now that the report is going somewhere other than to here, never mind. I'll let the SOS send it to me as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yes, Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly agree with those recommendations, and I would like to ask Senator Francisco, when would she require that this report or information be made to the legislature?
Let's maybe take a recommendation from, well, all right, Senator Francisco, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know that in this setting I can make any requirement. I was simply asking that it be included as a suggestion. And I think the Secretary of State does appear before those committees, and so knowing that might be very willing to provide some of that information. We could also make it a request by the chairs, but there's no way that I see this as changing the regulations or being put in any kind of deadline.
Sure.
Right, very
Thank you,
well.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, any for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment or State Board of Regents? Hold on. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the Kansas Corporation Commission, and we did have a request from Representative Corbett that we might want to include in the report. That Jordan, if you can remind the committee what that was.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. I had a note that Representative Corbett had requested the number of citations for those out of state or out of service violations from the KCC. I hope that I've stated that correctly and would leave that up to the committee to clarify if needed.
Representative Corbett.
Thanks. That would be great, and he summed it up very, very well.
I think that would be great. Thank you. Let's include that. Anything from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment or the State Board of Regents? Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Faust-Godot.
Madam Chair, I don't have a question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nothing for the State Board of Regents then, and Office of the State Bank Commissioner or the Department of Wildlife and Parks. Yes, Representative Corbett.
I would like to make a notation that since the night vision licenses were coming online, we just heard about it, I'd like to make some kind of a notation that I do think that landowners should not have to pay for something that's on their property. They're paying the taxes for the property. I think they've got enough invested already.
Thank you. Would that be a suggestion for the department then from the committee, or just a comment, or what do we think? Excuse me?
Food for thought or suggestion or whatever, but it's not really, it's just now happening, so they would have time to consider that before it's published in their fall rules and regs. They could talk about it at the next commission meeting, maybe.
Thank you. Any other comment? Representative Carmichael.
With all due respect to my colleague, I'm not 100% sure I go along with that suggestion. I mean, you know, I guess we can take a vote and see what the majority will of the committee is, or we can make it Representative Corbett's suggestion, but I'll let the chair handle that however they wish. But I don't want to sign on to that proposal myself. There you go.
Thank you. I'm happy to suggest that it's a suggestion from Representative Corbett. Does that make sense, Representative Corbett?
That's fine. I just think that the rural Kansas and the landowners have enough on their plate right now of sticking with another fee or something else for something that they've been able to do for nothing forever.
So that would be a suggestion from Representative Corbett.
Madam Chair, I don't want my friend Ken to think I'm 100% against his proposal. I'm just not ready today to try to make that important decision, which you and I have discussed many times over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. And any regarding the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission? I think, what are the committee's thoughts on, you know, we did have a lot of questions about data privacy, age verification, complaint procedures. Do we want to make any comment? Just that maybe, as Representative Corbett suggested, the committee recommends that the subjects of, quite frankly, consumer protection are a priority for the commission as they're looking at sports wagering. We can add to that or not have it. What are the committee's thoughts? Any thoughts? If I'm not hearing anything, we'll go ahead and put that in the
Madam
report.
Chair.
Representative Carmichael, and then Senator Fausto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All I want to say is my questions were simply designed to elicit some information, and so they didn't really, in my judgment, rise to the level of a committee comment or something that necessarily needs to be included. If other members want to include comments, and I'm always happy to emphasize the need for consumer protection, absolutely.
Senator Fausto.
Yes, Madam Chair, I certainly agree with you. I know that they do appear before the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee, and they will give a just overall update, but I would request that they specifically, inform the committee of any cases where they did find underage gambling. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so then we'll have some comment included that covers those subjects. Representative Wagner.
Yes, I would. I mean, some of the comments earlier on this topic when we were in the discussion with the folks from the that commission, I think it's not a bad idea. I think it's actually a very good idea to be, it's not just simply being able to read off the numbers from your parents' credit or from your parents' driver's license, but, that sort of simultaneous photo verification. I mean, industry standards is in one sense fine enough, but there is sort of an inherent industry incentive to kind of not look at it because it's more business. I mean, it's getting people who are close enough and who have access to somebody's credit card or something that I don't know. I thought it pointed out a real vulnerability that I think Kansas, it'd be better to be, or I would certainly want to encourage the Racing and Gaming Commission to be on top of it and not just to sort of shrug their shoulders and go with, the lowest common denominator. But that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, and I do like that language, encourage. Encourage the commission to continue to look at consumer protection issues as they arise in this industry. All right, Representative Wagner.
Yeah, just again, you know, you are seeing a lot more media nowadays about, now that sports wagering has been out in so many states for a number of years, as far as the increase in problem gaming for particularly young men. You know, you get some kids started at 17-ish, even it's worse than someone starting at 2021, and just anything to prevent the sort of underageness, I think is just, it's good for, it would be good for the state of Kansas.
Thank you. So, Mr. Milholland, are you kind of clear about what we'd like in the report? Is the committee clear? Maybe a quick restatement from Mr. Milholland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we've been going, I've been kind of putting together a comment in my head. So starting with the language that you had mentioned, that the committee would encourage the commission to look at consumer protection issues as they arise in the industry. I would probably, with leave from the committee, add language to specifically state something like, as they arise in the industry, specifically issues of age verification or preventing underage gambling, and also including photo verification. The other option, I guess, would be to, if you had a separate recommendation or comment on the photo verification, that could look something like, the committee recommends the commission add language to codify the industry standard of requiring photo verification when these Know Your Consumer websites process information for new accounts.
I think either of those is fine and to be included in the report. So not seeing any other suggestions, I think we need to take a look at next meeting dates. The earliest hearing is June 30th, so the best week for a meeting is June 22nd through June 26th. If we want to, are we talking about just a morning we think is necessary? Mr. Mulholland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the moment, we have 2 different sets that could be heard on that date, pending, agency availability. We will find out later this week what sets will be published, and those will be 60 days out and so on. So I would imagine that we would have at least probably 3 to 6 or 7 sets maybe at that point in time. It really just depends on what we get between now and then.
So for that week, is a Tuesday better for those? Meeting is Tuesday better than Monday? Yes. I agree. So June 23rd? June 23rd? Yes, Senator Francisco.
That should work, and Representative Carmichael might be help me with this. I know that we have a board meeting on the Wednesday, the 24th, and I don't know if they also talked about a workshop on the Tuesday before. But if it was a morning meeting, I could make both those work.
I think we're looking at morning of 23rd. Senator Tyson has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It wasn't on the schedule. It was Wildlife and Parks was going to get back to us, and I know the staff has been great about following up, but I just want to make sure they get back to us on those comments about the license, the landowners, and all the information that we requested from them today.
Yes, and that's a good segue for a brief synopsis from legislative research about the feedback we've had on our previous requests. But let's get a date on the calendar for our next meeting, June 23rd, 10 a.m. Senator Faustigodo has a comment.
So I was talking with the chairwoman of the Joint Committee on Child Welfare, Representative Howerton, and so we are possibly having a meeting on June 23rd or June 30th. And so I don't know if staff can confirm if a date was set yet for Child Welfare Committee, because it might conflict on the 23rd.
I don't think we have any information about that. So let's just Okay, we're checking. There's no date set yet, so let's go ahead with June 23rd then. Yep, you snooze, you lose. At 10 a.m. Is that, all right, so 10 a.m., June 23rd then. And could we have just a brief list of those entities who have responded since we last met to the committee's requests for information?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. As Chairperson Warren just mentioned, with each committee meeting, we have a report that our staff and the revisor statute staff collaborate on to send to agencies with the comments, recommendations, et cetera, that the committee has made during that meeting. Once we send those to agencies, if there are comments that require a response, we note that for each of those agencies. Since our last meeting on March 24th, we've received responses to committee comments at prior meetings from the Department of Agriculture. There have been a few from Water Resources specifically on dams, groundwater management districts, and water conservation areas. We also have a response on an updated one on dams and including information on CRP land. We also have a response from the Department of Agriculture concerning noxious weeds, and those were from that March 24th meeting. And then the final response to note is the Department of Revenue has provided some information on the Pregnancy Resource Act tax credit. And one thing to note too is that sometimes when the committee does not have comments, we still receive a letter from the agencies, and they will summarize public comments that they've received in responses to those comments. So those ones I just mentioned, not all of those had substantive comments from the committee, but they were letters that we received. We then keep those in an archive. We summarize them in the annual report that will come out after July 1st. And they are public records so that if someone is interested from the public or another legislator or agency staff would like to review those, they can request those from our office and we can provide a copy upon request.
Great, thank you. And with that then, if there's no other business before the committee, want to thank everyone and all our conferees and those following along online, our staff as well. Thank you, thank you. And with that then, our committee is adjourned.